Hi guys, welcome to the lesson for 9-5, completing the square. Our objective for the day is to be able to solve quadratic functions by completing the square, which Ms. Zirzo just did. Alright, problem number 1, finding c to complete the square. So what we're doing in this process is creating a perfect square trinomial that we can factor very nicely by adding b over 2 squared to x squared plus bx. So right now we've got x squared minus 16x plus some number that we're trying to figure out. Alright, so we set up our equation. It's going to be b over 2, so our b value is negative 16 divided by 2, and the whole thing is being squared. And that gives us 64. So now we write our trinomial x squared minus 16x plus 64.
Square number.
Perfect square.
Square number.
Perfect square. And we've got x minus 8 times x minus 8. Or we rewrite it as just x minus 8, the quantity squared. Here's a quick hint, guys. If you are completing the square properly, whatever you have inside the parentheses there is going to be what you are subtracting or adding down when you factor it. Alright, so letter B, we've got x squared plus 20x plus c. So we've got our b over a, the quantity, or squared, so we've got 20 over 1. Oh, sorry, b over 2, sorry. 10 squared is 100. So our trinomial is going to be x squared plus 20x plus 100. And it's x plus 10, the quantity squared.
How do I know if I'm right?
Well, we can always FOIL it and double check. So we'll have x squared plus 10x plus 10x plus 100. And 10 plus 10 is 20, so it's x squared plus 20x plus 100. So we're good there. All right, letter C. X squared plus 6x plus c. We do 6 divided by 2, which is 3, and we square it. So we're adding 9, x squared plus 6x plus 9. When we factor that, it's going to be x plus 3, the quantity squared. Okay. Letter D, x squared minus 7x. We've got negative 7 divided by 2, which is going to give us negative 3.5. Negative 3.5 squared is 12.25. X squared minus 7x plus 12.25, which when factored is going to be x minus 3.5 times x minus 3.5. Okay. We could also write it as x minus 3.5, the quantity squared. All right, next up, letter E, we've got w squared plus 22w plus c. 22 divided by 2 is 11. 11 squared is, you should be memorizing this, 121. So we've got w squared plus 22w plus 121, which is w plus 11, the quantity squared. So we can use completing the square to solve an equation. First we want to get the constants off to the side, so then we have a blank canvas to do our completing the square. So we're going to start by subtracting 16. X squared minus 14x equals negative 16.
Yes, it does.
So now we have an equation that's in the form x squared plus bx, where we can complete the square. So negative 14 divided by 2 is negative 7. Negative 7 squared is 49. So we're going to add 49 to the left, And everything that we do in an equation to one side, we must do to the other in order to keep it balanced. So we're going to add 49 to the right side of our equation as well. So negative 16 plus 49. And we're left with 33. Now the purpose of completing the square was so we would have a perfect square trinomial. So we've got x minus 7, the quantity squared, equals 33. Well, now we can take the square root of both sides, since one's a perfect square. So we have x minus 7 equals plus or minus 5.7. Now this is where you guys are going to have to start rounding with some of these. We're not always going to have perfect squares that we're taking square roots of. Round them to, let's say, 1 or 2 decimal places. So we set it each of the terms up. X minus 7 equals 5.7, and x minus 7 equals negative 5.7. Add 7 to both sides, and x is going to equal 12.7. Add 7 to both sides, and x is going to equal 1.3. Okay, those are 2 solutions. All right, letter B, we're going to do the same process. We're going to subtract that 15 to get it to the other side. We have x squared plus 9x equals negative 15. So we need to complete the square. So 9 divided by 2, which is 4.5. 4.5 squared is 20.25. So if we're adding it to the left side of the equation, it needs to be added to the right side as well. So we get x squared plus 9x plus 20.25 equals 5.25. The whole purpose of completing the square is to have a perfect square trinomial. So we have x plus 4.5 squared is equal to 5.25. Take the square root of both sides. X plus 4.5 is equal to plus or minus 2.3. So now we split into our 2 equations. X plus 4.5 equals the positive 2.3, and x plus 4.5 equals negative 2.3. Subtract 4.5 from both sides, and x is equal to negative 2.2. Do the same thing for the other equation, and x is equal to negative 6.8. Those are our 2 solutions. We're not always going to have nice, pretty numbers to work with. All right, letter C, we add 20 to both sides to move that over. We're left with n squared plus 12n, and that's going to equal the positive 20. Take our b value, divide it by 2, and square it. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 6 squared is 36. Add it to both sides of our equation. We've got n plus 6 when we factor it. The quantity squared is equal to 56. Square root of both sides of the equation. You get n plus 6 is equal to positive and negative 7.5. N plus 6 equals 7.5, and n plus 6 equals negative 7.5. Subtract 6 from both sides. We've got n equals 1.5, and n equals negative 13.5. 2 solutions. Letter D, we're going to start off adding 12 to both sides of the equation. X squared minus 4x equals a positive 12. We're going to complete the square. Negative 4 divided by 2 squared is going to be a positive 4. Add it to both sides of our equation. x minus 2, the quantity squared, equals 16. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. X minus 2 is equal to 4, plus or minus 4. So we're going to add 2 to, we're split into the two equations. So we've got x equals 6, and x minus 2 equals negative 4. Add 2 to both sides, x equals negative 2. All right, and that's where we're going to stop the lesson for today. If you guys want to look into factoring more difficult problems using completing the square, feel free to take a look at problems 3 and 4 in the textbook.